They didn't misunderstand you. They recognized something in you that they couldn't control. From the very beginning, something about you made people uncomfortable, not because you were loud, not because you were trying to stand out, but because your presence carried a weight, a depth, a quiet power that couldn't be explained. And instead of honoring it, they tried to shrink it. They questioned you, doubt surrounded you, subtle words, hidden attacks, even silence used as a weapon. It felt like something was being taken from you piece by piece. But here's the truth no one told you. They never had the power to take your gift. They only revealed it. Because every time they tried to suppress you, something inside you adapted. It sharpened, it awakened, it refused to break. And now, you're not the same person they tried to silence. You're something they can't stop anymore. You've always felt it, haven't you? That quiet sense that you don't fully belong to the world around you, like you're observing it rather than being consumed by it. While others follow patterns, you question them. While others accept limits, something inside you resists. That's not confusion. That's awareness. Being chosen doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean life gets easier. In fact, it's the opposite. It means you are given a path that forces you to grow through pressure, through isolation, through moments where nothing makes sense. Because your gift isn't something ordinary. It's perception. It's intuition. It's the ability to see beyond what people show and feel what they try to hide. And that kind of awareness threatens people who are still asleep to themselves. That's why the resistance came. Not because you were weak, but because you were becoming something strong. They tried to confuse you. They made you question your instincts. They told you that you were overthinking, too sensitive, too different, too much. But deep down, you knew something wasn't right. Because every time you ignored your inner voice, things fell apart. And every time you listened to it, even when it was uncomfortable, it led you somewhere real. That's how your gift speaks. Not loudly, but truthfully. And truth is something the world often tries to silence. You were never meant to blend in. And the more you tried it, the more disconnected you felt. That wasn't failure. That was misalignment. Because your path was never designed to look like theirs. You weren't meant to follow the same rules, chase the same validation, or build the same identity. You were meant to break patterns. And breaking patterns always creates friction. That friction you felt with people, with environments, even with yourself at times, was part of the awakening. Because something inside you was refusing to stay asleep. They didn't understand your silence. There were moments where you pulled back, where you stopped explaining yourself, where you chose distance over noise. To them, it looked like you were losing yourself. But in reality, you were finding yourself. Because when you step away from constant opinions, constant distractions, constant expectations, something powerful happens. You begin to hear yourself clearly. And once that clarity comes, you can't unsee anything. That's when your gift starts becoming undeniable. You start noticing energy shifts. You start reading situations before they unfold. You start understanding people without them saying a word. And it's not something you learned. It's something you remembered. But with that awareness comes a different kind of challenge. Isolation. Because not everyone can meet you where you are. Not everyone can understand what you see or feel or know. And that can make you question your path again. But listen carefully. Isolation isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's where your strength is built without interference. It's where your identity becomes independent of approval. It's where your gift becomes yours, not something shaped by others. And that's exactly what had to happen. Because if they couldn't control your gift, they would try to control your perception of it. Make you doubt it. Minimize it. turn it into something you're afraid to trust. But every attempt only pushed you deeper into yourself. And that's why you're here now. More aware, more grounded, more real. They thought pressure would break you, but pressure revealed you. Every setback you faced, every moment you felt overlooked, every time you were misunderstood. It wasn't random. It was shaping your resilience. Because an unstoppable person isn't someone who never struggles. It's someone who learns how to move through struggle without losing themselves. And that's what you've done. You didn't lose your gift. You refined it. You didn't lose your voice. You strengthened it in silence. You didn't lose your path. You discovered it through confusion. And now you see things differently. You no longer chase validation. You no longer explain your worth. You no longer shrink to fit spaces that were never meant for you. That version of you is gone. And that's why they can't reach you the same way anymore. Because you're not reacting the same way. You're not thinking the same way. You're not available to the same energy anymore. That's growth. That's awakening. That's power. And the truth is, they didn't fail to take your gift. They activated it. Every challenge was a trigger. Every doubt was a test. Every setback was a setup for your expansion. And now, you're not just aware of your gift. You're becoming it. Fully, unapologetically, without fear. So if you've been questioning yourself lately, if you've been wondering why your journey feels different, heavier, deeper than others, this is your confirmation. You're not lost. You're evolving. And everything you went through was necessary to bring you here. Now it's your move. Stop hiding what you already know. Stop dimming what was never meant to be small. Step into it. Own it. Walk in it. Because the moment you fully accept your gift is the moment you become unstoppable. If this message spoke directly to you, don't ignore that feeling. Like this video so more people who feel the same can find it. Drop a comment saying, "I'm stepping into my power to declare where you stand." And subscribe to Return to Awakening, because this is just the beginning of what you're about to understand. And even now, there's a part of you that still remembers how it felt when they tried to dim you. Not loudly, but subtly. Through looks, through tone, through distance. Like you were too intense to be understood, or too aware to be accepted. And for a moment, you almost believed them. You almost convinced yourself that maybe shrinking was the answer. Maybe silence would make things easier. Maybe hiding your depth would finally bring you peace. But it didn't. Because every time you tried to become less, something inside you resisted. A quiet discomfort. A feeling that you were betraying something sacred within yourself. And that feeling never went away. It followed you until you finally stopped running from it. That's when everything began to shift. Not outside. Inside. You started to see that your sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was awareness. You started to understand that your overthinking wasn't a flaw. It was your mind searching for truth in a world full of illusions. And most importantly, you began to realize that your difference wasn't a burden. It was your identity. But identity comes with responsibility. Because once you become aware of who you are, you can't go back to pretending you're not. And that's where the real test begins. Not in what they say, but in how you choose to respond. Because now you see the patterns. You recognize the energy. You can feel when something is genuine and when something is off. And that level of awareness forces you to make different choices. Harder choices. Lonelier choices. but necessary ones. Because growth requires separation from what no longer aligns. And that's not something everyone understands. They might call you distant. They might say you've changed. They might even try to pull you back into the version of you they were comfortable with. But you know better now. You know that going back would mean losing everything you fought to understand. And you didn't come this far to return to confusion. You came this far to step into clarity. That's why your circle got smaller. That's why your conversations became deeper. That's why surface-level connection started to feel empty. Because your energy evolved. And not everything can evolve with you. That's a hard truth to accept. But once you do, you stop forcing connections. You stop explaining your growth. You stop trying to make people understand what they're not ready to see. And instead, you focus on becoming fully, without apology. There's a power in that. A quiet confidence that doesn't need validation. A presence that doesn't seek attention, but naturally commands it. Not because you're trying to be seen, but because you finally see yourself. And when that happens, everything changes. Your standards rise. Your tolerance for negativity drops. Your patience for anything that disturbs your peace disappears. Because you've learned the cost of ignoring your own truth. And you're no longer willing to pay that price. But let's be real. This path isn't easy. There are moments where you still question everything. Moments where the silence feels heavy. Moments where you wonder if it would have been easier to stay unaware. To stay comfortable. To stay like everyone else. But deep down, you already know the answer. You were never built for comfort. You were built for truth. And truth has a weight to it. It separates. It exposes. It transforms. And transformation is uncomfortable by nature. Because it forces you to let go of who you were. Before you fully understand who you're becoming. That in-between space. That's where you've been living. Not who you used to be. Not fully who you're meant to become yet. And that space can feel confusing. But it's also where the most powerful growth happens. Because it strips away illusions. It removes false identities. It breaks attachments that were never meant to last. Until all that's left is what's real. And what's real about you can't be taken. Can't be copied. Can't be destroyed. That's your gift. Not something external. Not something given by others. But something rooted deep within your awareness. Something that becomes stronger every time you choose truth over comfort. Every time you walk away from what drains you. Every time you trust your intuition, even when it doesn't make sense. That's how it grows. That's how it evolves. That's how it becomes unstoppable. And now you're starting to feel it. That shift. That inner stability. That sense of knowing without needing proof. It's subtle, but it's real. And once you recognize it, you can't ignore it anymore. Because it's no longer just a feeling. It's becoming who you are. Day by day. Decision by decision. Moment by moment. You're stepping into a version of yourself that no longer seeks permission to exist. And that's where everything changes. And the moment you stop seeking permission, something inside you settles. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet certainty that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. You begin to move differently. Not rushed. Not desperate. Not trying to convince the world of who you are. Because for the first time, you're convinced within yourself. And that inner conviction, that's what they could never take from you. They tried to shake it. through rejection, through misunderstanding, through moments where everything around you felt unstable. But what they didn't realize is this: every time your external world felt uncertain, your internal world was being strengthened, layer by layer, truth by truth, until you reached a point where even chaos couldn't move you the same way anymore. That's the shift. When your peace is no longer dependent on what's happening around you. When your identity is no longer shaped by how others see you. When your direction is no longer influenced by fear. That's when you become dangerous in the best way possible. Because now, you can't be controlled. Not by opinions. Not by expectations. Not by pressure. And that kind of freedom, it changes everything. But freedom comes with a cost. It requires you to let go of illusions you once held onto. Illusions about people. Illusions about yourself. Illusions about what you thought your life was supposed to look like. And letting go of those illusions, it's not always easy. Because sometimes, you outgrow things you once prayed for. You detach from people you once felt deeply connected to. You walk away from environments that once felt like home. And that can feel like loss. But it's not loss. It's alignment. Because anything that requires you to dim your truth was never meant to stay. And deep down, you've always known that. You just needed time to accept it. That's why your journey unfolded the way it did. Not rushed, not forced, but exactly as it needed to prepare you for this version of yourself. The one who no longer negotiates with their own worth. The one who no longer ignores their inner voice. The one who no longer chases what isn't aligned. That version of you is solid, grounded, aware, and most importantly, unshakable. But let's go deeper. Because being unshakable doesn't mean you never feel anything. It doesn't mean you're always strong. It doesn't mean you've figured everything out. It means you've learned how to return to yourself. No matter what happens. You've learned how to sit with discomfort without running from it. You've learned how to face your own thoughts without being consumed by them. You've learned how to process emotions without letting them define you. And that level of self-mastery, it doesn't come easy. It comes from experience, from mistakes, from moments where you felt like you were losing yourself, only to realize you were shedding what was never truly you. That's the hidden part of awakening, the part no one talks about. It's not just clarity and understanding. It's also confusion. It's also doubt. It's also facing parts of yourself you once avoided. But that's what makes it real. Because real growth isn't perfect. It's raw. It's uncomfortable. It's honest. And you've lived through that more times than you can count. Which is why you see things the way you do now. Which is why you feel things the way you do now. Which is why you can't go back to who you used to be. Because that version of you wouldn't understand this level of awareness, wouldn't be able to carry this level of truth. And that's okay. Because every version of you had a purpose. Even the one that felt lost. Even the one that stayed too long in the wrong places. Even the one that tolerated things you now refuse to accept. They were all necessary. They all played a role in shaping who you've become. And now, you're no longer that person. You're someone who recognizes patterns before they repeat. You're someone who values peace over temporary pleasure. You're someone who chooses growth, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's not something that can be taken from you. Because it wasn't given by the world. It was built through your journey, through your awareness, through your willingness to face yourself, even when it wasn't easy. That's your power, and it's only getting stronger. And as your power grows, you start noticing something else. Not everyone is happy about it. Not everyone will celebrate your clarity. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Because your growth forces people to confront what they've been avoiding within themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. So instead of evolving, they resist. They project. They try to pull you back into a version of yourself that no longer exists. But this time, it doesn't work, because now you see it for what it is. Not personal, predictable, patterns repeating through different faces, different voices, different situations, but the same energy. And once you recognize the pattern, you stop reacting to it emotionally. You observe it. You understand it. And then you detach from it. That's a different level of strength. The ability to walk away without needing closure. The ability to release without needing revenge. The ability to choose peace, even when your ego wants to prove a point. That's mastery. And mastery changes how you move through life. You no longer chase people. You attract alignment. You no longer force outcomes. You trust timing. You no longer fear being alone. You value your own presence, because you've realized something most people never do. Your energy is your responsibility, and where you place it determines everything. That's why you've become more selective, more intentional, more aware of what you allow into your space, because you've experienced what happens when you ignore that awareness. You've felt the drain, the confusion, the misalignment, and you've made a decision not to go back there again, no matter how familiar it feels, no matter how tempting it looks, no matter how comfortable it once was, because comfort is no longer your goal. Alignment is, truth is, peace is, and those things require discipline, not just external discipline, internal discipline, the discipline to walk away when something feels off, the discipline to stay silent when reacting would cost your peace, the discipline to trust your intuition, even when it leads you away from what you thought you wanted. That kind of discipline, it's rare, but it's what makes you unstoppable. Because now, you're not easily distracted. You're not easily manipulated. You're not easily thrown off your path. And that's what they feared from the beginning. Not your voice, not your presence, but your independence, your ability to stand alone in your truth, without needing validation, without needing approval, without needing permission. That's power, real power, the kind that doesn't need to be announced, the kind that doesn't need to be proven, the kind that simply exists and shifts everything around it. And now, you're stepping deeper into it. You're no longer hesitating the same way. You're no longer second-guessing every decision. You're no longer shrinking to keep others comfortable, because you've seen what that costs, and you've decided you're worth more than that. But let's not ignore this part. Growth also brings visibility, and visibility brings attention. Some of it genuine, some of it not. Because when you start standing in your truth, you naturally stand out. Not because you're trying to, but because authenticity is rare. And rarity attracts both admiration and resistance. So you have to stay grounded, stay aware, stay connected to yourself. Because not everything that comes your way is meant for you. Some things are tests, disguised as opportunities, disguised as connections, disguised as shortcuts. But you've developed something now. Discernment, the ability to feel beyond appearances, to sense intentions, to recognize what aligns and what doesn't. And that ability, it protects you, not by isolating you from the world, but by guiding you through it. With clarity, with awareness, with purpose. And purpose, that's something they could never take from you, because it was never in their hands to begin with. It was always within you, waiting for the moment. You stopped looking outside for answers and started trusting what was already inside. And once you begin trusting what's inside, the noise outside starts losing its power. Opinions don't hit the same. Doubt doesn't linger the same. Fear doesn't control you the same. Because now, you have something stronger than all of it. Clarity. Not perfect clarity, but enough clarity to move forward without constantly looking back. Enough clarity to make decisions without needing everyone to agree. Enough clarity to stand on your own path, even when it feels uncertain. And that kind of clarity, it changes your relationship with everything. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop defending your choices. You stop trying to make your vision make sense to people who can't see what you see. Because you've realized something powerful. Not everyone is meant to understand you. And that's not rejection. That's design. Because your journey was never meant to be validated by the crowd. It was meant to be walked by you. Independently. Intentionally. With awareness that most people avoid. And that awareness, it comes with a different kind of vision. You start seeing beyond surface-level success, beyond temporary happiness, beyond things that once distracted you. You begin to ask deeper questions. What actually matters? What truly aligns with who I am? What am I building and why? And those questions, they shift your entire direction. Because now, you're not just living, you're choosing. Consciously, every step, every decision, every connection, and that level of consciousness, it's what separates you. Not in an arrogant way, but in a grounded, undeniable way. Because while others move unconsciously, you're aware. While others react, you respond. While others follow, you question. And that difference, it creates distance. Not because you're better, but because you're moving differently, at a different pace, with a different purpose. And sometimes, that distance feels heavy. You look around and realize you don't fully relate to what once felt normal. Conversations feel shallow. Environments feel draining. Energy feels off. And you start to wonder, where do I belong now? But here's the truth. You're not here to fit into spaces that limit you. You're here to grow into spaces that reflect you. And sometimes, those spaces don't exist yet. Sometimes, you have to become the person who creates them. Through your mindset, through your standards, through the way you carry yourself. That's leadership. Not in the loud, attention-seeking sense, but in the quiet, grounded sense of knowing who you are and refusing to be anything less. And that's where your journey is leading you, into a version of yourself that doesn't need to search for belonging, because it creates it, naturally, effortlessly, by simply being aligned. But alignment requires honesty, and honesty requires you to face things you once avoided, to admit where you settled, to acknowledge where you ignored your intuition, to recognize where you betrayed your own truth, just to keep things comfortable. And that realization, it can be heavy, but it's also freeing, because once you see it, you can change it. And that's exactly what you've been doing. Step by step, choice by choice, breaking patterns that once controlled you, releasing attachments that once defined you, rebuilding your identity on something real. Not expectations, not validation, not fear, but truth. And truth, it doesn't always feel easy, but it always feels right, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it requires you to walk alone, even when it forces you to leave behind what you once thought you needed. Because deep down, you're starting to understand something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You don't need everything to feel whole. You just need to be aligned with yourself. And that alignment, it brings a different kind of peace. Not the temporary kind, not the surface-level kind, but a deep, steady sense of knowing that no matter what happens, you won't abandon yourself again. And that decision, it changes everything moving forward. Because now, you're no longer building your life around fear. You're building it around truth. And truth, it doesn't break under pressure. It becomes clearer, stronger, more defined, just like you. And as you become more defined, you stop chasing clarity from the outside. You stop waiting for signs, for approval, for someone to confirm what you already feel. Because now, you trust your own sense of direction, even when it doesn't fully make sense yet, even when the next step isn't completely clear. You've learned something powerful. You don't need the whole path revealed. You just need to take the next honest step. And that's what separates you now. You move with intention, not impulse. You choose with awareness, not pressure. You act from alignment, not fear. And that shift, it's subtle, but it changes your entire reality. Because life starts responding to who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Opportunities feel different. Connections feel different. Even challenges feel different. Because now, you don't see obstacles the same way. You see them as reflections, as signals, as moments that reveal where you still need to grow or where you've already outgrown something. And instead of resisting them, you learn from them. You move through them. You extract the lesson. And you keep going without carrying unnecessary weight. That's growth, not perfection, but progress with awareness. And awareness, it keeps you grounded, because the more you evolve, the easier it is to lose yourself again in a different way. Through ego, through pride, through thinking you figured everything out. But your journey, it keeps you humble. It reminds you that growth never stops, that there's always another layer to understand, another level to reach, another version of yourself waiting to be discovered. And instead of overwhelming you, that realization excites you. Because now, you're not afraid of change. You welcome it. You don't resist transformation. You lean into it. Because you've seen what happens when you don't. You've experienced the stagnation, the discomfort of staying in places that no longer match who you are. And you've made a decision to never stay stuck again, no matter how uncomfortable growth feels. Because temporary discomfort is a small price to pay for long-term alignment. And you've lived both sides. You felt the pain of staying, and you felt the fear of leaving. But now, You understand something deeper. The fear of staying the same is greater than the fear of evolving. And that understanding, it frees you. It gives you the courage to make decisions your past self wouldn't have made. To walk away when necessary. To step forward when it matters. To trust yourself, even when no one else fully understands your vision. And that trust, it builds momentum. Because every time you choose yourself, you reinforce your own strength. Every time you listen to your intuition, you strengthen your connection to it. Every time you act in alignment, you become more of who you're meant to be. And over time, those small choices create a powerful shift. A version of you that is no longer easily shaken, no longer easily confused, no longer easily influenced. Because you've built something solid within yourself. Something that doesn't depend on circumstances. Something that doesn't collapse under pressure. Something that remains steady, even when everything around you changes. That's your foundation now. And from that foundation, you build differently. You think differently. You move differently. Not rushed, not forced, but intentional. Every step has meaning. Every decision has awareness behind it. Every action aligns with who you've become. And that level of alignment, it's rare, because most people are still searching for themselves, while you've started to find yourself. Not completely, but enough to know you're on the right path. And that knowing, it brings a quiet confidence. Not loud, not showy, but undeniable. It's in the way you carry yourself, the way you respond to situations, the way you no longer allow things that once disrupted your peace. Because now, you understand your value, not in a surface-level way, but in a deep, internal way that doesn't need validation. And that understanding, it protects you from settling, from overgiving, from losing yourself in things that were never meant for you. Because you've done that before, and you've learned from it. That's why you move with more awareness now. That's why you pause before reacting. That's why you observe before trusting. Not from fear, but from wisdom. And that wisdom, it came from everything you went through. Nothing was wasted. Not the confusion, not the pain, not the moments where you felt completely lost. They were all shaping you, preparing you, guiding you to this version of yourself. The one who no longer breaks under pressure, but transforms through it.